I've grown a lot as a teacher, teaching in very different contexts, in a traditional context, in a more liberal context. Um, and I've decided that I'm somewhere in between, actually. I don't necessarily completely agree with where the modern education is taking the next generation, but I also don't want to look back into the past and say that that was completely okay. I'd be somewhere in the middle. I think we can learn from both the past and the present, and hopefully we can guide the future generation accordingly.
So that's interesting. When you think about where the modern education is heading,
Mm.
where do you think it's heading?
I'm speaking from the perspective of my current school. I feel like there's that idea that, hey, so let the child decide for himself or herself how they should act. But I like to think of myself as a child. I'm like, would I have known how to act as a child? I think that that's a
Yeah.
little bit extreme of modern education. I'm like, we actually need. I'm like, why are we in school if we're not going to teach them if they can act on their own? It's like, look, I'm a literature. I was a literature student, and I'm a literature teacher, and one of the novels I tend to go back to is Lord of the Flies, where the kids try to create their own system um, when they're stranded on an island, right? So it reminds me of that when we let the children decide for themselves what is right and wrong. I don't think they always know. I think sometimes we might need to guide them. I feel like modern education might be going a little extreme towards that side of like, yeah, let them decide for themselves. But I'm like, yeah, but maybe sometimes we might need to like tell them directly what's right and what's wrong. I mean, we don't want them to choose something terrible. But I'm not by that I'm not condoning like the like that control that the traditional education had. I think, like I said before, I'm somewhere in between when it comes to educational philosophy.
Well, unfortunately, like when we think about how people think and make decisions,
Mhm.
when we think about an individual on individual level,
Mhm.
we can take into many kind of different aspects and think about how it's better to do a certain thing. But when we think about a larger kind of a domain, let's say public education or something like that, it's not as easy to be detailed. So you more or less start thinking in black and white kind of terms because
Mhm.
it's just easier.
Mhm.
So I that's I think one of the reasons why it's either okay, we're doing it like very strictly,
Mhm.
like the teacher is the authority, the student is the follower,
Mhm.
the students listen to their teachers, the teachers are absolute
Yeah,
gods and they
that's
know
the
everything.
traditional. That's the traditional way. Yeah, I
Whereas on the
always
other one,
yeah. On the other one, maybe I wouldn't say all schools do that. I shouldn't accuse all schools of doing that. But there are schools who would be like, yeah, let the child decide for himself or herself. Like maybe that's a little too extreme. I think I would say the other extreme. Um, I do believe in some objective good and bad because without
sure.
that, like, how do we know what is good and what is bad, right? So, I personally have been struggling for the past 3 4 years in regard to this, and maybe it's not every school, but there are some liberal schools that I've come across that go to the extreme of like let them decide for themselves. Like, yeah, sometimes maybe we might need to say what is the objective good and bad in that situation because otherwise, how would they even know? You know, like,
Well,
um, yeah, I know I sound a little conservative when I say this, but I think I'm
no,
somewhere
you
in
don't.
between. But
You sound like you have common sense, which is
yeah,
different in this kind of regard because, well, many people don't even believe that there's anything objective in general.
hmm
Everyone, well, the current climates of intellectual thought is leaning more towards that everything is subjective and that's why everything is true. Whereas
yeah,
there's
yeah,
nothing objective, and that there's an objective truth is only your truth. And in this kind of situation, it kind of invites like chaos in certain regards
yeah. I
because
think yeah,
there's no way how to monitor what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. what's
Yeah.
going the
Yeah.
right way and what's going the wrong way. It's just like,
Hmm.
it's like utter chaos.
Yeah.
And you know, you cannot go to that extreme, and you cannot go to the strict dominant order
Hmm.
extreme where everything is governed by one idea of reality and everyone has to obey. But as I've mentioned before, probably for some people, it's very hard to understand that it doesn't have to be like that or like that. There's like
Hmm.
an infinitude of possibilities somewhere in between. And when you think about even different kind of religious thoughts like Taoism, it's always
Hmm.
trying to find a balance, or even
Hmm.
Buddhism, the middle way, right?
Yeah.
So you want, and
The
it's
middle.
it's not, and you cannot really put it on paper because it's more complex than just like
It
logical
is.
thoughts. So it's more based on feeling and
Hmm.
understanding of the situation, how you should act as a
Hmm.
teacher or as a student. And I think that's the beauty of teachers, that they should understand how to act and
Hmm.
be agile and able to adapt to situations, and but also guide other people so they would be also agile and could adapt to
Hmm.
situations.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. True.
yeah, if I had a classroom with 30 students who would do whatever they want,
Hmm.
like imagine the situation. So you
Oh,
should
got it.
give them some freedom, but you
Hmm.
also, in that freedom, you should also be like, yeah, but I'm here, the adult with experience, and I
Hmm.
kind of have seen what works and
Yeah.
what doesn't. So
Yeah.
you have your own freedom and
Hmm.
subjective understanding, but also like, let's tilt it a little bit. So you're like guiding them
Hmm.
instead of ordering them. So you're
Hmm.
kind of acting as a guide, which is,
Yeah.
I think it's a good position to stand in.
Yeah, and I think that's the middle path is in like guiding them, providing rationale for why something is good and something is bad, and not dictatorial like the traditional way. But I also don't want to go to the extreme. The liberals isn't like, hey, just do whatever you want, you know? No, actually, let's think about this. Let's talk about why this may affect you and affect other people. And I do like to respect individuality because I like being an individual myself, but I also understand as human beings, we are social beings, you know, and our actions impact other people. And I think it's very important for students to understand that. Yes, you have your opinions, and I'm happy that you have them, but you also have to understand how your opinions or your speech or your actions might impact another person. Yeah. So I think that's for me is the middle path, I think.
Well, and that then you actually, you kind of explain that, you have choices, but you also have responsibilities. So
Yeah, it's
so
important.
it's not like you just do whatever you want,
Hmm.
because hey, life is not just about you, and
Yeah.
everyone should understand that, whether it's an adult or a kid, that like the entire existence is not just about you, and the external world is not just your toys. It's like
Hmm.
also, it's also entities that have their own life and decisions and their own internal realities, and you have to respect that.